In today's episode, you're going to see how complicated it is to put a case together. This is a consult with Maggie. The sound didn't work, so we had to do it over the phone. Recorded one side, and it's been a lot of work to put this one together. But with all chronic illness, there's multiple factors that create the problem. And this one is one of the biggest highlights of that I've done for a while. So this is your Health Reclaimed, where we expose the root causes fueling Lyme and chronic illness so you can finally heal. Helping you understand and heal the root cause of Lyme and chronic illness, reclaim your health and restore your life. I'm Dr. Montagne, veteran functional medicine doc. We typically can get people well again. I've been to multiple doctors and not really gotten any help at all, and this is one of those cases. So let's get into this. Okay, now we're good. Can you describe to me, Maggie, what these seizure-like episodes are like? Okay, so you can't walk very well. Do you get tunnel vision with these? Okay. And you can't walk. Does it just seem like you just kind of zone out or like asleep or something? Okay. Yeah, okay. That's what I wondered. It's not like your body's going into spasm. It's more like you're just kind of zoning out or blacking out some. Okay, how about the skin and rash stuff? Where do you get those? And have you ever associated that with anything? Okay. How about the UTIs? How often do those happen? And with irregular cycles, those seem to last 2 to 10 days. Is that what you meant by that? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna all right, I'm gonna start going through things more from one other thing. How long have you been eating the way that you've been eating, and why did you start eating that way? Okay, so you're always reacting to food, and that's the real problem. That's pretty common. And there's reasons why. So if we back up and we look at everything going on here, the overview of everything is your hormones all of them are upside down. You've got several of them, not just the ones with your cycles, the one that control your energy, your blood sugar, stress hormones, your typical sexual hormones. All that whole system is upside down. And generally what causes that to happen is toxicity that goes on. You feel toxic. You don't necessarily like your body odor either. That's a common symptom of toxicity. Most of that comes out of the gut, actually. And with the broad spectrum antibiotics you've had in the past, how long the courses were you on, do you think? The courses of the antibiotics that you were on in the past. For what? Oh, for what reason? Okay, so that was things like doxycycline. Yeah, I try and keep people from doing that because that destroys your health. What it does is if you look at the inside of your gut lining, this is where everything starts that you have going on. This is generally what sets the stage for people to get Lyme disease, and it's the worst complication that happens. It's actually worse than Lyme itself. But if you look at the lining of your gut, it's like holding your fingers up like this. Your fingers represent what's called microvilli. And the microvilli, it increases the surface area of your gut about 400 times. So it'd only be about 6 square feet if it was smooth. But with these microvilli in there, it's the size of a tennis court. It's pretty big. And those microvilli, they secrete a mucus. And in the mucus, you got all these microbes that grow and live inside of that mucus. The mucus caps over the top of where the microvilli stick up. Your food never touches the microvilli. It's the microbes that go up, do your digestion, bring the nutrients back, and then the microvilli can absorb all of those. Does that make sense? What the antibiotics do is it kills all those microbes. And it takes those microvilli and it creates a hyperinflammatory reaction, and they atrophy, so they just look like your knuckles, just like that. There's almost no surface to make the mucus anymore. There's nowhere for the good microbes to stay, and the good microbes are what keep in balance everything inside of the gut. When those get wiped out, the pathogens grow. One of the biggest pathogens that grows is Candida. Candida's got 4 forms. It's got a yeast form, fungal parasite form, and a mold form. And if you look at mold, the fuzz that comes off of that, that's the mycelia. Those are the feeding tubules of the fungus, fungal parasite, and mold form. Those mycelia, actually all of the cell walls of the fungal forms and the mold forms are made up, and the yeast form actually, is made up of the same thing that makes the outside skeleton of a shrimp. It's called chitin. Same thing that's the outside hard part of like beetles and crickets and things like that. That chitin that makes up all the cell walls of those things, the immune system can't touch it. The only thing that keeps it in check is the healthy microbes that grow inside the gut. So once you impair those microbes and you wipe them out, they flush down the toilet, and then all these bad things grow inside of that. And those bad things create these hyper-toxic environments. Those toxins get inside of the gut wall. They create autoimmune responses where it destroys the gut wall even worse. They leak into the bloodstream. They overwhelm the liver. They go out systemically, and they create toxic reactions all over the body. When they can't get out through the toilet, through the normal toxic detox pathways, then they try and get out through your skin and your lungs. That's where asthma, rashes, and all that come from, is the toxicity trying to come out. Has those rashes been worse since the Lyme disease? Okay, so you wouldn't know a difference. Yeah, and that's pretty common. We've seen families, 3 generations of that. And microbes like Lyme disease, they have no respect for boundaries at all. So it's easy for those to pass. Anything that moves fluid from one host to another can move Lyme disease, all the co-infections, and a bunch of other things too. So mosquitoes can do it, gnats can do it, biting flies can do it, ticks can do it, sharing a milkshake can do it from the saliva. It's in sexual fluids. It crosses the placental barrier. It doesn't respect any boundaries whatsoever. So being born with it's pretty common. Yeah, we had a young gal a few years back. She's got to be probably close to 11 years past being free of Lyme and not having it anymore. She was born with it. Her life was absolutely miserable. She started working with us when she was 17, and her whole life turned around and came back. She had learning disabilities too. Had a whole bunch of things, very dyslexic, and once the Lyme cleared, she didn't realize she had a really bright mind. She went off to school, college, halfway across the country, and met Mr. Right, got married. They got a couple children now. So that's kind of neat, but that's what sets the stage for all this. And toxicity is what dysregulates virtually every metabolic function in the body. It dysregulates all the hormones. It dysregulates your ability to digest. It dysregulates the ability to make the hormones that control your blood sugar. It dysregulates adrenal function. It dysregulates thyroid. And when you look at different symptoms like what you have, tired and sluggish, cold hands and feet, hair thinning and all that, you're too young for that to be going on. That's all thyroid problems. You look at the exhaustion, the craving of foods at different times, dizziness on rising, all that's adrenal issues. Your adrenals actually create the precursors to the sexual hormones in both men and women. And when there's chronic stress going on, all those precursors to make the sexual hormones, they get shunted over to make inflammatory hormones, and it doesn't feed the sexual tissues. And then you start to have cycles that are irregular and not making a whole bunch of sense whatsoever at all. That's generally half the cycles of thyroid, and it's the adrenal that feeds the hormones that normalize it on the other side. So when you have both of those going on, they're just up and down. There's nothing normal and regular about it. Does that make sense? So some of the things that feed all this is, when you sent the pictures, those showed, like your face, it looks kind of puffy. The things that you put in there about belly fat, all that is hormonally driven. It's not from eating too much. And a lot of people think they can starve hormones into behaving, but you can't. You need to feed them so that they function right and pull the toxicity off so that all these other functions can start working very well. Brain fog is just another symptom of too much toxicity. In fact, most of the symptoms you have is all because of too much toxicity. So you look at the connective tissue problems that you have. You can see some lines in your face that are indications of those connective tissues. Being hypermobile is connective tissue. That all goes back to the gut, where you're not processing your proteins properly, which is part of the reason why you get your stomach burns after you eat and some of the other fluctuations go on. That is a reflection of the atrophy of the gut wall going from here to here where the microbes going off. And instead of digesting food, they ferment it and they rot it. So we don't get proper nutrients coming in. Then there's another bacterial infection that happens in the stomach called H. pylori. That makes it so you can't produce enough stomach acid to digest your proteins. When there's not enough stomach acid, it doesn't stimulate bile to be excreted to digest your oils. The undigested oils and undigested protein inflames the gut and makes the atrophy get worse, like this, and makes so you can't absorb your minerals either. So it puts you in this huge nutritional deficit that goes on, and because of all the way that all the testing is, the tests just are not accurate as far as the ability to determine what food intolerances are. They're only 2 to 3% accurate. And the idea of trying to eliminate foods on your own, it doesn't work either. The guy that came up with that idea is Dr. Jeffrey Bland. He's the one that started the functional medicine movement. And the last picture I saw him, his face looked like a blimped out strawberry from all the food intolerance reactions that he had. His idea of this elimination diet to identify your intolerances doesn't work because the responses can be delayed 3 weeks or more from when you eat something, and it could be a long ways away from the gut, and there's just no way to connect the dots. So you're in the same boat that everybody else is. That's why we do so much with food intolerances. That's why we test the way we test, because we can find what they all are. We can test what you have in your store, in your cupboard, at the local farmer's market, the way that we test, and the way that everybody else does it. You just can't find any of those things. So inadequate diet is a huge thing that sets the stage for all this, and that sets the stage for the connective tissue problems that go on. And then when you have that stage set, you introduce something like Lyme disease. The immune system, over half your immune system's in the gut. And it's so tied up with dealing with the toxicity that it doesn't have any strength to fight off infections like Lyme disease. And this is what makes things go chronic all the time. As soon as you introduce antibiotics, all the Lyme bacteria and co-infections drive into biofilms within a couple hours. They can hide out there for, the studies show 17 years, but indications of what we've seen in testing people is longer than that. And they'll just stay there. They can eat, they can multiply, they can create all their toxicity. As soon as they're in the biofilms, antibiotics can't touch them, neither can the immune system. So they just stay hidden in these colonies, and as soon as you get stressed out, they break out. You get another overwhelming course of Lyme, and that's the reason why they never dealt with it right in the first place. They just drove everything to biofilms. So all this can be addressed and reversed, but this is what sets the stage for all your complaints, everything that's going on. Does that make sense? You got any questions on any of this so far? Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm not sure how to, okay, there it is. Okay, can you see the picture of your MRI on here right now? There we go. Okay. Now, if you look at this if you go down from the top, all those squares are your vertebrae that are there. And the very top one that you see, the full square, at the bottom of that arcs, so it's kind of rounded on the bottom. That's probably your lowest cervical vertebrae, because that's usually where they're shaped at. And the one below that is pretty square. Can you follow me so far? Yeah, basically, yeah. And it's basically square with just slight roundness on the corners. So the corners aren't sharply square, but they're rounded square, just a little bit. And you go to the one below that, it's pretty close to that, and the front edge arcs in just a little bit in the middle. The one below that, so we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, you start to see on the top of that, the top line starts to round down just a little bit. Not much, but just a little bit. We go down another one, that one looks pretty normal. If we go down one more, the front edge starts to round a lot. And it's just a hair narrower in the front than it is in the back. You look at the spaces from below that one, the gray lines. from below that one all the way up to the top, they're pretty uniform in size. Can you see that? Those are your disc spaces. So now you can see me, if we're looking over here, to the left of where we're showing, you see the MRI. Okay, well you can pull this up on your what you emailed to me, and I'll explain this to you. Once there's a spot here where the back makes a sharp curve, and it's pretty straight above that, pretty straight below that. It makes a sharp curve, and you see the vertebrae kind of in a wedge shaped. All those wedge shapes are growth plate injuries. And what they indicate is some kind of a fall that happened. Do you remember having a pretty significant fall at all, Maggie? You don't. Because what happens in that area is when you injure the growth plates, they don't grow normally. And the front edges, they start to round quite a bit. And you'll see, when you look at it on the email, you'll see this. The disc below, they're pretty straight and pretty even, but where those vertebrae start to get wedged, you see black lines going up into the vertebrae, up above, and some of them going down into the vertebrae below. The disc spaces in there are hydraulic reservoirs. And when there's a pressure that happens inside those reservoirs that's too much for the integrity of the young, weak growing bone, it impregnates up into the growth plates. And what you have, those dark lines, is where the disc has gone up into the vertebrae up above. There's a bunch of hydraulic injuries. And the vertebrae, instead of growing taller, they grew longer. And you'll see that pretty clearly. It looks like, from the pictures you sent, Ben, and I'm gonna, there was probably some kind of an impact, and who knows what that was. Might have been gymnastics, we don't know. But it injured the growth plates, and it pushed the hydraulic reservoir of the disc up into the end plates of the vertebrae, which decreased the space between the vertebrae. That's going to change the function of the ribs in there and the function of the back in there. The best people that can manage that and make that so it's functional is chiropractor, by far. And I was talking to your dad. If you can find one that I can pull this up and talk to him about it and talk about some creative ways to go about it and how to address the ribs in there, we should be able to make all that normalize way more than it has been. Because it doesn't look like you have a huge amount of impingement as far as bulging, compressing the spinal cord. You have loss of disc height, so the mechanical side's not working very well. Right, and give them some really unique things. I've got some very, very different ways that they don't teach in school. I've always dealt with oddball things like this, you know, things that most people don't know how to touch, and they can be managed well. But you've got to find somebody who's humble enough to be taught how to do that. The ribs, they're weird. They make there's three joints of the rib coming into the spine. The first joint, there's two wings that come off the spine toward the back, and the first joint comes and it touches those wings. Those are called the transverse process. The other two joints, the head of the rib, it makes a joint right where the disc space is, in between the two vertebrae. So when you have something like this, it changes the mechanics of the ribs, and you've got to free those mechanics up so they work right. The ribs have to lift like this to breathe really well, And when you have an injury like this, they just get stuck and they don't move. And you've got to mobilize the ribs so that they move and breathe like they're supposed to, so that calms down quite a bit. There's some specialized ones to do that. You got one of your chiropractors, does he have a decompression machine? Yeah. It won't if you don't do it right. There's a better way to do that manually, because manually you can concentrate on just one level at a time. And you can put a negative 120 pounds of pressure inside of those discs just with your hands. You can add some other things and you can triple that pretty easy. And what it does, it helps pull all the bulging out and it helps separate the disc spaces quite a bit. So the key with all joints is they have to move properly so that they don't create pain. And when you have something like this, you have a multitude of joints that aren't moving properly. That irritates everything, and that irritates the nerve roots, and that goes out. So once you start to mobilize those, that can calm down significantly. Yeah, the compression machines, the mechanical ways, there's problems with those, and they can't restore the normal function the way you can with your hands. So, and it sounds like you had that experience, right, Maggie? This one's getting a bit long, so I'm going to cut this one in half right here. So tune in next time. We release these every Monday and Thursday for the second half. Thank you.